Hi everyone, greetings one and all. Before I launch into my weekly monologue, as I'm wont to do, permit me, if you will, a quick reminder to check out my patreon.com site. It's by signing up there, by joining there, that you show real practical support for the channel. The cost of it is about the same as the price of a cup of coffee in a high street shop every month, but in return you get early access to all my content and you get an exclusive ticket to a question and answer session that we film every week. It's great there on that site, so join up, stir yourself into the mix and help make it even better just by being there. Okay, now it's time for this week's monologue. Do you know the story, or the parable really, about the blind men and the elephant? I'm sure some do. I'm sure some don't. But the idea is that three blind men are led into a space with an elephant in it. And none of these blind men even knows that such creatures as elephants exist. So they are blind in every way. And they're invited to find their way to the great presence, and each makes contact with a different part of it. One ends up holding the tail, one ends up holding an ear, one ends up holding the trunk, and they start describing their individual discoveries to each other. But as time goes on, they get angrier and angrier with one another because their experiences are so different. What each is experiencing doesn't match up with what he's hearing from the others. And each of the blind men thinks that the other blind men must be fools, if not downright liars. And eventually they're on the point of coming to blows. And the moral of the story, of the parable, is that what they needed to do was take a step back and listen to one another calmly, and then maybe realise that each had only a part of the bigger whole, and that bigger whole made sense when all was understood to be one huge, hitherto unexpected reality. What I'm saying is the so-called conspiracy theories, all of which are dismissed by many people, just dismissed out of hand, it might be like that. Individual fragments, all real, but ultimately impossible to make sense of until we realise each is only a part of one whole vast truth. So we're all fumbling blindly in the proximity of an elephant of truth. The elephant I've begun contemplating is nothing less than the idea that the whole story we've been told about the world is a fraud, a lie. I'm finding it's becoming increasingly hard to overlook the possibility that what we've been offered hitherto, especially here in the West, I can only really speak for the West because that's where I have always lived, is as fake as any Hollywood film set. Just clapboard with nothing behind it. I tell you what, entertaining the depth of the falsehoods and carefully confected illusion, making space for it, coming to terms with the extent to which we have been duped, is a damn tough bullet to chew, as Rudyard Kipling said. On the upside, however, a fake is not worth holding on to, because it's not what it purports to be. And it's certainly not worth crying about after it's gone. Fool's gold is called fool's gold for a reason. And in response, I spend more and more time on what I know to be real, what I can guarantee by personal experience to be real. And I spend less and less time on what I know to be false. I let it go. We're undoubtedly enmeshed in a lot that we've been persuaded, or perhaps have persuaded ourselves we can't live without. And there's the rub. Modern life hangs suspended on a vast scaffolding that we've paid to build. We've had it built around us at our expense. For a start, I can say for myself that I spent most of my life accepting huge load-bearing myths, historical foundations underpinning everything else. Those myths, those load-bearing myths, are hard to give up, like booze and drugs. Any other crutches are hard to give up. Notions about good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains, from the past and around us now. More of the illusion, perhaps most of it, is made of what might reasonably be regarded as ephemera, fluff and froth, made to seem irreplaceable and critical to survival. I know I come from a time before most of it. But I've lived long enough that most of my life was lived before what's come now, by which I mean the vast matrix of technology, technological convenience, if you like, that holds us up, like crutches and Zimmer frames, like wheelchairs and supplies of intravenous drug. By now, I've come to despise my own addictions, and I want to break free. I read somewhere that if everyone in the world was to get their head shaved on the same day, head lice, as experienced by humankind, would be extinct forever. That'd be an end of it. So with that in mind, I do wonder what would happen if we all did away with our smartphones at the same moment. Gay abandon, just threw them away. Would we be free forever from all of that self-inflicted, expensive, intrusive, hypnotising irritation? It's certainly true to describe those appendages as handcuffs that we put on ourselves and click shut. I stand on railway platforms, or in queues at the airport, or I walk down the street, and I see every person, sometimes every person without exception, male and female, young and old, adopting the same depressing posture. Head down, shoulders hunched, phone in hand. More and more I notice, though, how fundamental are the things, the powers that ought not to be, are determined to take from us. And those two moves are connected, of course, like different parts of the elephant. While on the one hand getting us hooked on their tech, doing everything to make us dependent on that tech, they are simultaneously seeking to take away from us the most basic things. Remember how by lockdown, the state kept families apart from one another. It's accepted fact that of all the contributors to a healthy, happy life, healthy, happy relationships are number one, numero uno. And yet, in the name of public health, the state moved to isolate loved ones in care homes, to ban families from getting together in the same place, in the same room. It's honestly hard to imagine a tactic more malign, more malevolent. And yet precisely that was pushed upon the unsuspecting population as being for the common good. God help me, I listened to the wickedness as well. I briefly thought it best to keep loved ones at arm's length. How terribly wrong I was. More recently, those same malign presences have come after warmth. Warmth. Here in the northern latitudes, especially, warmth is essential to life itself. It's cold and dark here for a large part of the year. For hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, our kind and variations on the theme of human have kindled fire and light. Fire to stay warm, fire to cook food, light so that we might see each other's faces while we talk and thereby reassure one another by our presence. This latest iteration of a Labour government in the UK has decided to take away from pensioners the meagre cold weather allowance that for many tipped the balance in favour of being able to heat as well as eat. Stop for a moment to contemplate what a fundamental, life-denying, life-condemning, egregious wrong this is. Labour Minister Ed Miliband, in charge of fulfilling the terms of the mass suicide note that is the infamous so-called Green Agenda, has been celebrating the closure of the last coal-fired power station in Britain. It was called Ratcliffe-on-Soar Power Station, and it had been generating electricity since 1968, providing enough power at any given moment for 2 million homes. Ratcliffe-on-Soar became the last of its kind in Britain in September last year, when the coal-fired Kilroot Power Station in Northern Ireland went cold and dark. We've had energy from coal-fired power stations in Britain for 142 years, starting with the roaring into life of the Holborn Viaduct Power Station in London in 1882, the first of its kind in the whole world. The most charitable thing I could say about Ed Miliband, in charge of energy, God help us all, is that he's an idiot. I could apply other labels, but let's leave it at idiot. He's been celebrating the launch of 131 new renewable energy projects. Projects that are finally and only appealing to the companies behind them because of the eye-watering scale of the subsidies Miliband has promised them. The cost of the latest projects to the taxpayer could balloon to £10 billion, and that's only an estimate. The British here on these chilly isles are being reamed for some of the most expensive energy on the planet. The prices we're paying here don't prevail elsewhere, not by any stretch of the imagination. We've got it worst. The climate crisis is, in my opinion, a hoax. And it's being used to inflict upon entire populations nothing less than immiseration. Misery. And if those populations are winnowed, reduced as a result, which seems inevitable, then so much the better for those that regard us as the problem. It's my prediction that now we're so dependent on wind and solar power that we will see blackouts and brownouts in the months and years ahead. How could we not? Often the wind doesn't blow. Very often the sun doesn't shine. The globalists tugging on the strings of puppeticians like Ed Miliband are utterly anti-human, regarding you and me as data points, dots on spreadsheets, or insects if you prefer. In order to deepen our addictions to all their artifice, all their fakery, all that tech, where the large print giveth, while the small print taketh away, the totalitarians would undermine family, sterilising children along the way in the name of gender ideology, and they would extinguish the home fires. They would take away the food as well, hence the policies to drive farmers from the land so that the food providing land might be repurposed by corporates or God knows what. If they can, those globalists will replace the real food that yet survives with more of the ultra-processed crap that already inhibits or compromises the life chances of so many. Family, fire, food. These are the fundamentals that are inimical to the anti-human ideology of the globalist totalitarians. The financial system that has enriched the rich for centuries is ready for replacement. Hence the long heralded advent of digital IDs, CBDCs, social credit scores, more parts of the elephant. Anyone pointing out any part of the problem, an elephant's ear here, a trunk there, has to be shut down as a conspiracy theorist. That much is obvious. So obvious that grandees of the political system in the USA, like Hillary Clinton, like John Kerry, are insisting the end is nigh, that the end must be nigh for the US Constitution and the freedoms it enshrines. Because those freedoms, those inalienable rights, are getting in the way of the globalists. Silencing is all they have left. They would take the family, the fire, and the food, and they would take our words as well. And so this is what I mean when I say I concentrate more and more on what I know to be real. The time may be at hand when we must do nothing less than turn away from the illusion they have had so many of us believing in for so long. Maybe before the tech is finally so manipulated and controlled that the last dissenting voice is silenced, we should set in place an analogue backup plan of such simplicity it could never be erased. Maybe before the tech separates and isolates us once and for all, rather than uniting us, we should agree some places and times where we might meet if all else fails, and there be together. Like the passcodes for cryptocurrency accounts that are stamped into metal plates and buried, knowledge of those locations would be beyond the reach of the enemy. It'd be better than messages in bottles. It would be held in our heads. If the technocrat oligarchs turn out our lights, we could gather where their scaffolding casts no shadow. Thousands of years ago, the ancestors had places in the landscape, clearings in the wild wood, circles of stone and heaped earth, where they knew on a given day, marked by the rising of the sun or of the moon, there would be others of their kind, and family, and fires, and food. I'd like to have places like that in mind, just for comfort. As Rumi said, beyond right and wrong, there's a garden. I'll meet you there.